To truly understand the damage this discovery caused, one must remember who Prince Andrew was before the scandal, a man once admired and celebrated. Before the controversies and isolation, the Queen's second son, the Duke of York, had been viewed as confident, capable, and charming, a modern royal for a new generation. His early years were steeped in tradition, but it was his military service that defined him. His time in the Royal Navy, particularly his role as a helicopter pilot during the 1982 Falklands War, became a point of national pride. Flying dangerous missions under fire, he earned respect not just as a prince, but as a man who had faced real danger. In the years that followed, the media portrayed him as brave, charismatic, and likable. By the late 1990s, he was a central figure in Britain's global outreach, representing the country in trade and investment initiatives. As the special representative for international trade and investment, Andrew mingled with world leaders and top business figures, earning a reputation for being persuasive and well-connected. His presence at diplomatic events symbolized the prestige of the crown itself. Yet that same proximity to power, as history often shows, also brought scrutiny. Those close to the palace remember a man who gradually came to believe in his own invincibility, a confidence that at times slipped into arrogance. Accounts from aides and civil servants later painted a picture of someone who had become difficult and increasingly detached from royal protocol. The discipline that once defined his naval career seemed to give way to the indulgences of royal privilege. His personal life further added complexity to his image. His marriage to Sarah Ferguson in 1986 was among the decade's most celebrated royal events, watched by millions as the vibrant young couple waved from the Buckingham Palace balcony, appearing full of love and promise. The Duke and Duchess of York quickly became beloved public figures, and their daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, would later speak fondly of their father's protective and devoted nature. However, cracks soon began to show, and by 1996, the marriage had fallen apart. Over time, whispers grew louder about his spending habits and dismissive attitude. His social circle increasingly filled with wealthy businessmen and elites whose reputations were far from spotless. As a trade envoy, he often traveled for private interests instead of official duties, prompting questions about whether he served the crown or himself. Yet, despite mounting controversy, Andrew continued to enjoy a level of protection few public figures could imagine. As the Queen's son, accountability came slowly, if at all. The monarchy's instinct was always to preserve, not expose. Inside the palace, senior advisors worked to shield him from growing criticism, but behind closed doors, unease was spreading. Concerns, though not yet public, arose over the company he kept, the dinners he attended, and the introductions that seemed too casual for a man of his position. For years, these worries remained confined within palace walls. When history looks back on this era, it will see a man unaware of how close he came to losing everything. Andrew's reputation had carried him far, perhaps farther than merit alone could have. But reputation, like trust, is fragile. It can take decades to build and only one revelation to destroy. How did Andrew become entangled with a man whose downfall would ultimately bring about his own? For years, their connection remained unspoken, whispered in coded language by journalists and barely acknowledged by the palace. But once the truth began to surface, it could no longer be contained. The name Jeffrey Epstein escaped the confines of private power circles and became synonymous with scandal, one that spanned continents and implicated some of the most powerful figures in the world. And at the heart of Britain's royal establishment, one name appeared again and again: Prince Andrew. Andrew's friendship with Epstein began in the late 1990s. Introduced by Ghislaine Maxwell, a woman deeply entrenched in both high society and Epstein's inner circle. At the time, Epstein was publicly known as a wealthy financier connected to global elites, his life both opulent and secretive. To Andrew, he embodied wealth, influence, and the kind of exclusivity that had long surrounded the Duke. They attended parties together, shared friends, and were photographed in multiple cities. What once appeared to be casual association would later be seen as a grave error in judgment. By the early 2000s, Epstein's reputation began to crumble. Allegations of sexual misconduct surfaced, initially dismissed as rumors by many. For Andrew, they were apparently reasons to exercise discretion, not distance. Even after Epstein's 2006 arrest on charges involving minors, Andrew failed to sever ties completely. Officially, the palace called it a misjudgment. Privately, insiders admitted the Duke either underestimated the severity of the situation or believed his royal position would protect him. Then, in 2010, Andrew was photographed walking with Epstein in New York's Central Park, shortly after Epstein's release from prison. The image shocked the world and outraged the British public. It wasn't just the friendship itself, it was the indifference it seemed to display. A senior royal, shielded by privilege, appeared to flout moral standards others in public life were bound by. The scandal deepened in 2015 when U.S. court documents named Andrew in connection with Virginia, one of Epstein's most outspoken accusers. Although Andrew denied the allegations and claimed no memory of meeting her, the damage was irreversible. The infamous photo of him with his arm around her waist, with Ghislaine Maxwell smiling beside them, became one of the most analyzed images in royal history. Experts and journalists debated its authenticity for years, but regardless of its truth, it stood as a haunting emblem of the scandal that redefined his life. Publicly, the palace issued carefully worded statements emphasizing Andrew's denial and cooperation with investigators. Privately, advisors were dismayed by his lack of remorse and inability to grasp the public outrage. One senior courtier later admitted that the monarchy thought it could weather the scandal, but it could not. Already strained by generational change, the institution could not survive another crisis so close to its core. When Epstein was found dead in his cell in 2019, the controversy only intensified. Questions of accountability, complicity, and truth reverberated across governments and global media. For Andrew, this was the moment his public life became irreparable. Every photograph, every trip, every association from the previous 2 decades came under scrutiny. His 2019 BBC interview, meant to clear his name, only deepened the disaster. Analysts described it as the interview that ended his career. His tone appeared detached, his answers defensive, and the public's judgment was swift and unforgiving. For many viewers, the feeling went beyond disbelief. It was disillusionment. When Virginia Gray's civil case was settled out of court in 2022, the palace made every effort to further distance itself from the controversy. Official statements stressed that no admission of guilt had been made, but public opinion had already hardened. The British public, once willing to distinguish between private mistakes and public duty, could no longer make that separation. Polls showed that most people believed Prince Andrew should permanently withdraw from royal duties, and gradually he did. His military titles were returned to the crown, his patronages were taken away, and his Buckingham Palace office was closed. What remained was silence, and a name forever changed. Then, in early 2024, tragedy struck. Virginia Joffrey, whose accusations had shaped much of the public's perception of the case, passed away. Reports claimed she had taken her own life. Though the palace offered no comment, the news cast a long and somber shadow over everything that had come before. It reminded the world that behind every scandal are real human costs that can't be erased or paid off. Her death reignited conversations about justice and accountability, not in courtrooms, but in the collective conscience of a society still struggling to define how much power excuses and how much truth demands. By October 2025, a newly revealed 2011 email reappeared in public discussion, serving as a chilling reminder of the contradictions that had long surrounded Andrew's defense. Investigators called it the missing piece that unraveled years of denial. As that revelation surfaced, it wasn't just his integrity that came under scrutiny. It was the credibility of the monarchy itself. Prince Andrew's downfall had become much more than a personal scandal. It was now a defining example of what happens when entitlement clashes with accountability. The private failings of one royal had become a moral test for the monarchy. His past heroism, rank, and royal lineage could no longer shield him. The man who once proudly stood in uniform under his mother's flag now stood alone, not as a figure of service, but as a warning of consequence. The question lingered. Could the monarchy survive the silence that followed, the cost of honor and the burden of truth? The British monarchy has withstood wars, divorces, and deaths. It has weathered countless scandals, adapting with composure to each new era of scrutiny. Yet what unfolded after the Andrew revelations was far more personal. The year 2025 didn't just expose an old deception. It forced Britain's most private family to face what loyalty truly means when truth can no longer be ignored. Though royal engagements continued as usual in the months following the resurfaced email, a quiet unease lingered. The Duke of York's name was erased from official communications. His crest, once engraved on invitations and embroidered on ceremonial garments, disappeared completely. For the first time in modern royal history, a senior family member had not just stepped back, but had been institutionally erased. Those within the royal household described it as a mourning without death. For King Charles, finalizing Andrew's removal from all royal duties required more than a signature. It demanded a father's acceptance that the monarchy's moral authority outweighed parental instinct. It said he reviewed the statement multiple times before signing it, torn between duty and emotion. Yet the final decision was not his alone. In the modern structure of the crown, Prince William had taken on the role of shaping its future. The responsibility for handling the fallout ultimately rested on his shoulders. When the official announcement came, it was brief and formal. It declared the matter concluded in accordance with integrity and duty, without mentioning Andrew or the email directly. But the message was unmistakable. The Duke of York's remaining ceremonial honors were permanently revoked, and his public role reduced to that of a private citizen. In just a few sentences, a chapter of royal history quietly ended. Behind that simple statement, however, lay a reality that no press release could convey. Insiders described it as one of the most difficult moments of Prince William's public life. For a man devoted to preserving the monarchy's dignity, distancing himself from his uncle, his father's brother, was a painful act of duty. Yet throughout it all, William followed the guiding principle his mother had lived by. That public service must never be built on privilege, even for him. The burden of this particular duty was overwhelming, weighing heavily within the family itself. The effects were deeply felt. Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie stood firmly by their father, choosing to withdraw from public life. Queen Camilla, ever the realist, reportedly supported William's firm stance, reminding him that the monarchy cannot be ruled by emotion. Meanwhile, King Charles bore the visible strain of a choice that had fractured his own family. Andrew remained secluded at the sprawling royal lodge, seldom appearing in public. From time to time, he was spotted driving alone through Windsor Great Park, occasionally pausing to watch planes pass overhead from nearby Heathrow. Despite his wealth and estates, what he lacked now was purpose. And in a family where one's identity is defined by duty, that loss felt like exile. In the days after the announcement, public debate surged. Newspapers filled with commentary on what many called a new royal standard. Yet behind the headlines lay a more intimate truth, a family forced to look inward. For the first time, accountability had been enforced not as a matter of reputation, but as a genuine test of integrity. As with many scandals before it, this one would likely fade with time. But when it did, what version of the story would remain? Because throughout the long history of Britain's crown, such moments have never destroyed the monarchy. They have reshaped it. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. Even within the world's oldest institution, the most difficult reckonings are not fought in the public eye. They unfold quietly, in the private spaces where conscience and power finally confront each other. What's your take on Andrew's role in the Epstein case? Was Prince William's decision the right move? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. And be sure to click on the next video now playing on your screen. You won't want to miss it.